Hello everybody and welcome back. In this video in our series on Docker containers, we're going to discuss some concepts. And the two main concepts to start with are immutability and ephemeralism. Immutability means not changing over time, unable to change, doesn't change. So when we deal with that with containers, containers should be built once and never change. Now that doesn't mean that we can't build different containers at different times to update our code or to update what's inside of those containers. It just means that when those containers are in production and doing their thing, or in development and doing their thing, they should never change until we're ready for a new release or some new debugging, etc. The second concept I'd like to discuss is ephemeralism. Ephemeralism is short-lived, does not stay up for a long period of time. A real-world example of something that's ephemeral is a human. We're born, we live our lives, and then eventually we expire. In the container world, our containers are not designed to stay up for a long period of time. So bringing back the concept of immutability, we have this container that we created, we'll never change it, and we bring it up for a very short period of time. Well, that can make sense because you have to update your programs, you have to secure your programs, you have to change your applications. So if you put it inside this container that's immutable, then how could you do that? You're building new containers that have new versions in them, new elements in them, and then you can bring them up and you can bring them online in an ephemeral way and keep that cycle, that software cycle going. So those are the two concepts of immutability and ephemeralism. The next concept that I want to discuss is monolithic applications versus microservices. A monolithic application is a very large application that all the parts and pieces that work to make that application run are all in one place. They're all under one belt. The program can basically just sit on one single server and do its thing. In this traditional sense of an application, when we have an issue or a problem, we have to troubleshoot the entire application in itself and work to deal with the parts and the pieces all in one place. We also have to share resources. And the next concept that we'll talk about, which is horizontal scaling versus vertical scaling, I'll go into more depth on that. So that's your monolithic application. A microservice application is where, if you haven't guessed already, you can take that monolithic app and break it out into its different pieces and parts. And you can have your back-end SQL server running in one piece, you can have your Python program running in another piece, you can have an API running at another piece, etc., so on. So all your services could be broken out, and it helps to allow you to control your application a lot better. And it's a new concept that has been developing over the last several years. You can have a container that runs each one of your services, so you wind up, instead of having one container or one server or one virtual machine that's running this application, you have a whole bunch of containers that are doing different chores, and each one of those services that they're doing are connected together. So as I mentioned in the previous concept of monolithic versus microservice, I brought up horizontal scaling and vertical scaling. So let's go back to that monolithic application. Let's say we have a user base of 10 people working on that server or connecting to that server. And everything is working fine and we're up and running, but then all of a sudden our user base grows to 1,000 or 10,000. All of a sudden that server is working overtime and it can't really do its job. So we have to bring it down, open it up, add more memory, add more hard drive space, add more I/O ops, add more CPU power. And when we do that, we vertically scale that up. And that's called vertical scaling And it's traditionally what we used to do before microservices came on the scene and containers actually came on the scene. So containers and cloud environments where we're able to bring up as many instances as we want, we don't have to worry about the hardware in the cloud, etc. We have horizontal scaling. Now we take this immutable container that we've created and put out there in our production environment, and it's doing its thing. It has 3 or 4 containers. They're all working together in order to make our application work. And they're all smaller containers. They're not this big monolithic container. And our 10 user base then all of a sudden grows to that 20,000 user base again. Well, all of a sudden, we need more containers. So what we do is we just horizontally scale our containers and bring up more containers and more containers. All the different elements and pieces of those containers or those services don't change. And we just bring them up horizontally, and as we find that we have problems, we can destroy them and bring up new ones. Now, all of a sudden, our 20,000 user base during the holiday season wound up to be only 10,000 because, it's the summertime and nobody's really cares about this service as much as they did during the holiday time. Well, then we can go ahead and destroy a whole bunch of our containers and bring it back down and horizontally scale it backwards to meet the demand without having the cost of running those containers during the high demand periods. Hopefully this makes sense to you. So this brings me to my last concept before I end this video, and that's the concept of pets versus cattle. In the DevOps realm, we use this pets versus cattle concept all the time, and it goes right back to the idea of containers and servers or bare metal servers or instances in the cloud that are changing all the time, running monolithic applications. All those concepts kind of feeding back into itself. And a pet is that server that we care about. It sits there and we have to feed it either more memory, more CPU, more IOPS, which is input output. But the overall element of this is that we have to care about it. If there's problems, we have to troubleshoot it, and we have to make sure everything is right at all times. Now, let's move over to cattle. Cattle, on the other hand, we don't really care for them that way. We raise them and we bring them into our environment, but they're ephemeral, and when problems happen with them, we don't necessarily have to troubleshoot why these problems are happening. We just basically destroy them and bring up new cattle, new containers. And the whole idea of not having to care about and love our servers is what this whole pets versus cattle concept comes into play. So I think that's enough with concepts, and I think we're ready to move on and to learn some really cool, neat things. So the next video is going to be how to use the Docker command line so that we can work with it when we're building containers, and we'll do some command line things to bring up containers and kind of see everything in action. If you like the content that I'm putting out, please like and subscribe to these videos. I hope you enjoyed this video. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.